Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. Let's get started and look at article number 1 on ED. Questions Soren for over 8 hours in tribal land scam case. For a long time now, constitutional experts and some scholars have been arguing for more and more smaller states in India, calling for the reorganization of the entire country into more and more smaller states. Their argument is that small is beautiful. The argument is that if United States can have more than 50 states, India surely can have more than 28 states. The arguments that they put forward, they say the advantages of creating more and more smaller states would be 3. Number 1, administrative convenience. Which means if a state is smaller, it becomes administratively convenient to administer and govern that state. For example, 1905, when Bengal was partitioned by Lord Curzon, what was the rationale given by the British? Yes, the intention was to drive a wedge between Hindus and Muslims. The intention was that we should displace Calcutta as the center of the nationalist movement in India. But the stated objective of the British was that we are dividing Bengal because it becomes administratively very difficult to govern such a large province. That is why our intention is, for administrative convenience, let's partition Bengal. Scholars say if more and more smaller states are created, it would be administratively convenient to govern those states. That's advantage number 1. Smaller the state, it would result in equitable development. All the regions of that smaller state would be equitably developed by the government. And third important advantage of a smaller state would be stable polity. Jharkhand was carved out from Bihar in the year 2000. So if the argument is that create more and more smaller states, because smaller the state, stabler the polity, this does not hold true for Jharkhand. In fact, we can say that Jharkhand is the most unstable political unit in India. Over the past 2 decades, we have had 11 chief ministers in Jharkhand. We have had an instance where for the first time, perhaps for the first time in independent India, an independent member of the Legislative Assembly went on to become the Chief Minister, Mr. Madhu Koda. So if the argument of the experts is that smaller the state, stable the polity, that does not hold true for Jharkhand because it is considered to be the most unstable state politically in India. In fact, the former Chief Minister, the Chief Minister before Mr. Hemant Soren, Mr. Raghubar Das, he is the only Chief Minister to have completed a full 5-year term. And now we may see history being repeated if Mr. Hemant Soren is also removed. But it is not this alleged land scam case which is going to affect Mr. Hemant Soren deeply. It's another case which acts as a Damocles sword on the top of the head of Mr. Soren. And that becomes important for the civil services examination. What is that case all about? Mr. Hemant Soren, the Chief Minister, he was also holding the portfolio of mining and forests. As the Chief Minister, he was also the Minister of Mining and Forests. And the allegation is that as Minings and Forests Minister, he allotted a lease mining lease, stone quarrying to himself. The former Chief Minister, Mr. Das, addressed a press conference and conveyed to the people that as the minister, Mr. Hemant Soren leased to himself a stone quarrying or a mining lease to himself, which is violative of Representation of the People Act 1951, which is violative of Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. And this tantamounts to holding an office of profit. We will not go too deep into what is this office of profit, but let me make it simpler for you so that we understand this newspaper article. The very purpose of office of profit is to separate legislature from the executive. We are a parliamentary democracy where council of ministers are drawn from the legislature. That means executive is drawn from the legislature. But if there is one small grain of separation of powers between executive and legislature, it is this office of profit. Our constitution talks about separation of powers between executive and judiciary, not between executive and legislature. But in one small fashion in which we ensure separation of powers between executive and legislature, that is this office of profit. Which means a legislator should not come under the influence of the executive. Because the job of the legislator is to hold the executive accountable, to question the executive. So if this legislator is holding offices under the executive, this legislator would come under the control, under the grip of the executive. That is why any legislator holding an office of profit should be disqualified. How is this an office of profit? Mr. Hemant Soren, if he is the owner of a mining company, but he is also a legislator, member of the State Legislative Assembly, and if the executive, the government, has awarded a contract to this mining company, which means this legislator is under the influence of the executive, violating office of profit, thereby should be disqualified from the State Legislative Assembly. And Mr. Das approached the governor because in this circumstance, who can disqualify Mr. Hemant Soren? This power is given to the governor. Governor of that state shall disqualify a legislator, a member of the Legislative Assembly or Legislative Council, if that individual is holding the office of profit. But governor cannot act on his own. Governor has to refer this matter to Election Commission of India, seek report of the Election Commission of India, and whatever report is given by Election Commission of India, that is binding on the governor. Now what happened? Mr. Ramesh Bais was the governor of Jharkhand. He referred this matter to Election Commission of India, asking Election Commission of India, should Mr. Hemant Soren be disqualified for holding the office of profit? Election Commission submitted its report. We don't know what is mentioned in that report. That report is confidential. But according to newspaper reports, Election Commission of India had recommended that Mr. Hemant Soren should be disqualified. Which means, according to the law, this report is binding on the governor. Governor has to disqualify Mr. Hemant Soren. But governor did not act on this report. At least 2 former chief election commissioners have said that this is something unprecedented. This has never happened in the history of the independent India, where a constitutional entity, Election Commission of India, is giving a report to the governor and the governor is not acting on that report, is sitting on that report. Over a period of time, Mr. Ramesh Bais was also transferred to another state. And later on, he was asked, why did you not act on this report? He said, I did not want to affect the development of Jharkhand. But be that as it may, now the existing governor, the current governor, has to decide whether Mr. Hemant Soren should be disqualified for holding this office of profit. And Mr. Hemant Soren seems to have violated Section 9 capital A of the Representation of the People Act 1951, according to which a person shall be disqualified if you have a contract from the government. As long as you have the contract from the government, on the grounds of Representation of the People Act also, Mr. Hemant Soren should be disqualified. And if that happens, then this logic that small is beautiful in terms of stable polity, it again will not hold true for Jharkhand, because now we will have another chief minister not completing a full term of 5 years, which means Mr. Raghubar Das is the only chief minister of Jharkhand to have completed a full 5-year term. Let's wait and watch what are the developments in this case. Then we will have another round of discussion for the civil services examination. Clear? Let's look at something else. India-Myanmar border to be fenced soon, says the Union Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah. And the government is reconsidering its free movement agreement with Myanmar, which this newspaper article says was implemented in 2018 as part of India's Act East policy. But this free movement regime, as we call it, did not originate in 2018. It has a long history. That's something that we will have to focus on today. And the history starts in the 1950s. Immediately after the independence of India, the government of India realized that there are tribes along the Indian side, along the Myanmar side. They move freely into each other's territories, because these tribes, they share familiar relationships with each other across the border. They share cultural, historical ties. For their livelihood also, they migrate to each other's territories. And the government of India decided that we will allow Indian citizens as well as Burmese citizens. Myanmar was then called Burma. We will allow citizens to enter into India, Burmese citizens to enter into India, Indian citizens to enter the Myanmar side without any passport, without any visa, for up to 40 kilometers. And this is what we call free movement regime. Free movement in the sense, without a need for passport, without a need for a visa, Indian citizens can cross India-Myanmar border, travel up to 40 kilometers in Myanmar. The Burmese citizens can cross the border and travel up to 40 kilometers on the Indian side, because these tribes, they share cultural, historical, livelihood ties with each other. There was a difference. The difference was Burmese can stay in India for 72 hours, while the Indians can stay in Myanmar for only 24 hours. And this process continued, but then came the crisis as well. Insurgency in Northeast. The year was 1956, when the Nagas rebelled against the government of India. The year was 1964, when Metis also started insurgency, militancy in Manipur. The year was 1966, when another tribe, Mizo's, they also started rebelling against the government of India. And it is this free movement regime which ultimately played havoc in India. Insurgents, what they would do, they would cross India-Myanmar border, travel to Myanmar, get arms training, come back to India, launch an attack on the security forces, then through this free movement regime would go back to Myanmar and stay there. Not just this, drug trafficking, illegal human trafficking took place through this free movement regime. And ultimately what government decided? Government decided that instead of free movement regime, we will now have a permit system. Indians crossing this border will need a permit by the government. Myanmar citizens crossing this border to come to India would need a permit issued by the Burmese government. Without this permit, you cannot enter. So from this free movement regime, we entered into a permanent or a permit system. Even then, the problems continued, because this India-Myanmar border is not fenced, unlike the India-Bangladesh border. And it's also very porous. There are multiple entry and exit points along this border. In fact, we share close to 1,600 kilometers of border with Myanmar, spreading across states such as Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Nagaland, Manipur. 1,600 kilometers of porous border, unfenced border between India and Myanmar. The government then, in the year 2004, decided to limit the distance. From the earlier 40 kilometers, now the distance is 16 kilometers. That means Myanmar citizens can cross this border to enter up to 16 kilometers in India. And now, instead of using any entry point, any exit point, only 3 points were earmarked for this free movement. One was in Arunachal Pradesh, the other in Mizoram, and the third one in More, Manipur. If you are attending these sessions regularly, a couple of days ago, we discussed this More border town along the India-Myanmar border, which is on Asian Network Highway. And I told you in 1960s and 70s, people of Tamil origin in Myanmar, they started migrating back to India. Most of them settled in Chennai, but some of them could not be habituated to this environment in Chennai. They wanted to go back to closer to home, and they settled in this border town of More in Manipur. And this is where I also told you that the second largest temple structure in Dravidian style is in More town in Manipur. So instead of using any exit or entry point, now in 2004, the government decided to restrict the movement to only 3 points, one in Arunachal, the other in Mizoram, and the third one in Manipur. But all this agreement was not documented. India was allowing its citizens to cross this border. Myanmar was allowing its citizens to cross this border. But there was no India-Myanmar agreement to facilitate this, to formalize this. And that formalization happened in the year 2018 when agreement on land border crossing was signed between India and Myanmar. So this newspaper article, which says this free movement regime was implemented in 2018, it basically should have been, it was formalized between India and Myanmar in the year 2018. Because this free movement regime, it dates back to the 1950s, not to 2018. Manipur, for example, it has suspended this free movement regime in 2020, right after the COVID-19 pandemic. And Manipur government is vociferously asking the government of India that you should fence this border and you should stop this free movement regime. Because Manipur government says it is the insurgents from Myanmar who come to Manipur to spread terror in Manipur. So the recent conflict that we see between the Kukis and Meiteis in Manipur, the Manipur Chief Minister, Mr. Biren Singh, says the onus is on the insurgents coming from Myanmar. Drug trafficking is because of this free movement regime. So long story short, Manipur wants to put an end to this free movement regime. But Mizoram does not agree. Even Nagas do not agree. Mizos say there are Mizos on the Indian side, there are Mizos on the Myanmar side as well. And this boundary between India and Myanmar is artificially created by the British. We don't agree with this boundary because we share cultural, economic, linguistic ties with the Mizos on the other side of the border. In fact, in Myanmar, you would have read there was a uprising by the military junta. The government of Mr. Aung San Suu Kyi's party, it was overthrown and military captured government in Myanmar. The junta, the military junta as it is called in Myanmar. And after that, there was a massive migration of people from Myanmar to India. And it is argued that close to 40,000 migrants have come to Mizoram. The government asked Mizoram government to identify them. The Mizoram government says no, because these are our brothers and sisters. So Mizoram is in favor of the continuance of this free movement agreement. So are the Nagas. But the Manipur government, the Métis predominantly, they want an end to this free movement regime. A very important topic for internal security. Okay? Let's look at something else. Fake Mysore Sandal soap factory raided in Hyderabad. Mysore Sandal soap is manufactured by Karnataka Soaps and Detergents Limited, which is a government company. And this production of Mysore Sandal soap dates back to 1916. When Krishna Raja Vadiyar IV was the king of Mysore. But what was the motivation for Krishna Raja Vadiyar IV to start this Mysore Sandal soap factory? The motivation was there were sandalwood reserves, massive sandalwood reserves in Mysore. And mostly these sandalwood reserves would be exported to Europe. But this period was the period of World War I, where the king of Mysore was sitting on massive sandalwood reserves, which could not be exported to Europe because of the First World War, because of the ongoing First World War. And thereby, he started this manufacturing, production of Mysore Sandal soap, which is the world's only soap manufactured with 100% pure sandalwood oil. An important thing for your examination is that it has a geographical indication tag. Geographical indication. For example, Tirupati Laddu. For example, Nagpur oranges. If you go on and buy Nagpur oranges and the shopkeeper is telling you these are Nagpur oranges, which means you can vouch for the authenticity that indeed they are from Nagpur because they are unique to their geographical location. Any product, if you can convince, if you can prove that this product is unique, if you can explain properly the entire process of manufacturing of this product, how the raw materials are sourced, what makes this product unique, it will be given a GI tag. And Mysore Sandal soap also has a GI tag. Another important thing that you must remember for the civil services examination, particularly prelims, is that Tamil Nadu has the highest number of GI tag products, 61, followed by Uttar Pradesh, 56, then Karnataka, then Kerala, then Maharashtra. 4-5 names should be more than enough if such a question is asked in the prelims examination. Clear? Let's look at something else. Celebratory capers with cattle. In South India, Makara Sankranti gives a unique space to cattle with wide range of customs. For example, in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, bulls, they are colorfully decorated with flowers, with garments. We call them Gangi Redu. And this marks the beginning of the Sankranti festival in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Then what happens? This Gangi Redu community, what they do? They take these decorated bulls house to house and seek alms. But the most important thing is, in Karnataka, we also see that cows and bulls are made to walk through fire. And in Tamil Nadu, during the Pongal festival, we see Jallikattu. And this becomes important because there is a very important Supreme Court judgment on Jallikattu. Jallikattu basically is bull taming sport, where these bulls, they are thrown open, they are made to run, and then there is an individual. It marks the Pongal festival basically in Tamil Nadu. Jallikattu basically means a silver or gold coin which is mounted on the horns of this bull. And there is an individual, there are individuals who try to tame this bull. Whoever comes on top of this bull basically wins the race. This practice was considered to be unethical by animal rights activists. PETA, for example, People for the Ethical Treatment for Animals, they say that we have documented evidence, we have proof that these bulls are tortured. We have proof that these bulls are intoxicated by liquor, intoxicated by drugs. They are given high-performance drugs so that they can ransack, meander here and there, and ultimately the saddest people will see this bull being tortured, and then someone would tame this bull, and that's how people celebrate. These are not my words, these are the words of PETA. Something happened. The year was 2007. You don't have to remember these dates, just understand the concept, just understand the flow. The year was 2000. A single judge bench of Madras High Court said Jallikattu is exploitation. Ban was imposed on Jallikattu. Now a division bench of Madras High Court, it said no, there is a stay on the ban. Jallikattu will continue. Matter went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said Jallikattu will continue, but you have to ensure that you do not impose cruelty on these animals, on these bulls. Something else happened. The year was 2011. What central government did? Central government said these bulls, these are non-performing animals. Because there is a law, Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960. Rules have been issued, notification has been issued by the central government saying these bulls are non-performing animals. That means you cannot make them perform, which means Jallikattu cannot continue, cannot happen. And then a landmark judgment in 2014, Animal Welfare Board of India versus A. Nagaraja. The Supreme Court said Jallikattu is exploitation, it is cruelty towards animals, there is a ban on Jallikattu. Obviously, it raised a hue and cry in Tamil Nadu. People said, how can Supreme Court question our culture? Because this is a cultural practice in Tamil Nadu. And something else happened. The year was 2016. The central government issued another notification saying bulls are now performing animals. And in the year 2017, 1 year later, Tamil Nadu government, Tamil Nadu legislature is passing a law called Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Tamil Nadu Amendment Act. How can Tamil Nadu legislature enact such a law? It can. How? Because if we look at separation of powers, or distribution of legislative subjects under 7th schedule of the Constitution. Entry 17 deals with prevention of cruelty. Entry 17 of concurrent list. And any item in the concurrent list, both Parliament as well as state legislature, they have the right to make a law. But if this law passed by the state legislature goes against the law passed by the central government, then what law will prevail? Central law or state law? Central law. But if the state law, which goes against the central law, receives the assent of the president, then it is the state law which will prevail. And this prevention of cruelty to animals, Tamil Nadu Amendment Act, it received the assent of the president and Jallikattu was legalized. Matter again went to the court. And last year in 2023, now the court had to decide what will happen to Jallikattu. Is it constitutional, unconstitutional? Is this amendment valid or not? Is this notification valid or not? Is this law violating the 2014 judgment of the Supreme Court or not? Because in this judgment, the Supreme Court said animals also have fundamental rights. Particularly fundamental right under Article 21, which deals with right to life and personal liberty. But in 2023, a constitution bench, a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court said, Jallikattu is constitutional. Jallikattu is allowed. Why is Jallikattu allowed? Supreme Court said, horse racing, is it allowed or not? Yes. We will equate horse racing with bull taming. Even in horse racing, there is pain involved. Even in bull taming, there is pain involved. What we need to ensure less pain. Practice Jallikattu, but please ensure you do not subject these bulls to extreme pain. The government said we will ensure it because whenever Jallikattu is to be performed, the organizer will have to take the permission of the district collector. District collector will have to inspect this organizational adventure to check whether some intoxicants are given to the bulls, whether cruelty is committed upon these bulls. There are enough procedural safeguards to ensure that cruelty will not be committed against these bulls. Government, Supreme Court said, completely fine. Supreme Court said, we don't agree that fundamental rights are for animals as well. Constitution talks about fundamental rights only for the humans. We cannot extend these fundamental rights to animals. The Supreme Court was asked, what about Jallikattu as a cultural practice of the people of Tamil Nadu? Because if it is part of culture, it gets higher degree of protection under Article 29 of the Constitution. What is Article 29? A fundamental right. Any section of citizens residing anywhere within the territory of India, if you have a distinct language, script, and culture of your own, and if you want to preserve that culture, you have the fundamental right to preserve that culture. And if Jallikattu is part of culture of Tamil Nadu, they have the right to protect it, preserve it. Supreme Court said, on this question, we may not like to answer. Whether it is part of culture or not, that is beyond our scope. We don't want to enter into that territory because that is beyond our competence to decide whether it is part of culture or not. Because for that, we have to go through history, we have to go through various texts. That is not within our domain, but Jallikattu is allowed, subject to, you don't subject these bulls to cruelty. Similar to that, we have the Kambala in Karnataka. That's also allowed because now bulls are performing animals. That's what you need to understand from this newspaper column, Celebratory Capers with the Cattle. Let's look at the last article. Why are conflicts spreading in West Asia? And we have discussed this topic at least twice. since we started the newspaper analysis on this channel. And let me briefly summarize for somebody who has just stumbled upon this YouTube channel. I will briefly summarize. For those who have already watched the analysis of this topic, you may well leave. You can watch or you can go through the means-based questions that I will provide after this lecture is over. But those who are watching it for the first time, stay with me for the next 5 minutes. I'll summarize. October 7, Hamas breached the Gaza-Israel border, mounted an attack on Israeli civilians, killing more than 1,000 civilians, approximately taking 250 hostages, including women, children, and the elderly. And this led to a war between Hamas and Israel on Gaza. And more than thousands and thousands of people have been killed in Gaza. Hospitals have been bombed. There is an international hue and cry. South Africa has taken Israel to International Court of Justice, saying what Israel is doing in Gaza is nothing but genocide, which is prohibited by United Nations Convention, Genocide Convention of 1948. And on the other hand, we are seeing something else. There are Shia-backed militants, backed by Iran, whether it is Hezbollah of Lebanon, whether it is the Houthis of Yemen. And Hezbollah is mounting attack on Israel. Yemen is mounting an attack on United States-based troops and blocking the Red Sea, which is an important sea route. Because for goods from Asia to move to Europe, if there is no Red Sea, if Red Sea is blocked, then these goods will have to go to the Africa, through the Atlantic Ocean, and then move to Europe. So the shortest route between Asia and Europe is via this Red Sea, which is being blocked by Houthis, where they are using even helicopters to take some vessels hostage as well. Lots of conflict is happening in the Middle East, which led to a point where Iran attacked Pakistan and Pakistan retaliated by attacking Iran. And we have discussed the reasons why, because there are some terrorist groups. One such group is Jaish al-Adl, which is a Sunni group based in Pakistan. And its principal objective is to separate Sistan-Baluchistan province from Iran. Iran mounted an attack on Jaish al-Adl headquarters and installations in Pakistan. Pakistan retaliated. But now these two countries have said enough is enough, we are friends. We will restore our diplomatic relations, because Pakistan had recalled its envoy from Iran. And the Iranian envoy in Pakistan, who was then in Tehran, he was asked, stay there, don't come back. But now they have restarted their diplomatic relations. And for that, the important player is China. It is argued that the China, which is also a friend of Pakistan, all-weather friend of Pakistan, a good friend of Iran as well, it is this China which has brokered peace between Iran and Pakistan. If you look at Middle East, which is under chaos right now, turmoil right now, you may get a sense that Middle East is in a state of anarchy today. But there is one more thing which is fascinating. There is peace between two countries, two sworn enemies till recent past, and that is Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia, a Sunni majority country, Iran, a Shia majority country. They were not seeing each other eye and eye. But ultimately, amidst all this chaos, these two countries, they have not attacked each other. Houthis, which are supported by Iran, who are the Shia rebels, they have not attacked Saudi Arabia as well. And for that, experts say the credit is given to China, because it is China which is now bringing Saudi Arabia closer to Iran as well. And the one entity which is watching all of this is United States. United States is unable to perform its role which it used to perform as the leader of the world order. Fascinating developments happening, although anarchy in Middle East, but it remains to be seen what China will do and what the elections in United States will do. If Donald Trump comes back to power as the president of the United States of America, how will he position the American policy in the Middle East? That's something that we will have to wait and watch. For now, let's look at two mains-based questions for your practice on Sunday. Question number 1, despite being a widespread problem, people often do not take animal cruelty seriously. Animal abuse is a sign of other psychological issues and should be seen as a major red flag. Comment. Somebody is abusing an animal, and there are others who just don't care. Why are these people abusing animals? It speaks to a larger psychological issue. Somebody may be a sadist. You just want to see others in problem, in chaos, in distress. That's a psychological problem. Mental unsoundness. A large number of people who abuse animals, they're suffering from some mental and psychological disorders. Maybe they have seen violence at home. Maybe they are the victims of violence themselves. So although there is widespread problem, animal abuse is being sidelined, overlooked, but that speaks to a larger psychological problems that the people are facing. That's question number 1. Question number 2, the idea that legislature would control the government is inapplicable in parliamentary democracy because it's the government that controls the parliament. In light of this statement, comment on the need to abolish office of profit as a ground for the disqualification of a legislator. Principal objective of the legislator is to control the executive through questions, through motions, through resolutions, through debates. But in a parliamentary democracy, where the ruling party almost always has the majority, it is this ruling party, it is the executive which controls the legislature. The kind of laws that are being passed by the parliament, how many private members' bills have been passed since independence? It's the government agenda which always carries through the parliament. And I told you what is the principal objective of office of profit ground. That legislature and executive should be separate from each other. Legislator should be in a position to control the executive. But that doesn't happen in a parliamentary democracy because it's the executive which controls the parliament, which controls the legislature. When it is always the executive which controls the legislature, what is the point in retaining office of profit as a ground for disqualification? That is why constitutional experts such as Faizan Mustafa, who was the former Vice Chancellor of the Nalsar University of Law in Hyderabad, he has called for the abolition of this ground as the ground for disqualification. That is it that we had to discuss on Sunday morning. And if you have stayed with me on a Sunday morning, which means you are a very serious aspirant, and there is no power on earth that can stop a serious aspirant from qualifying and cracking this examination. If you have liked the session, do not forget to press the like button, drop in your comments, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and share the links of these sessions with your friends and fellow aspirants. Happy weekend. See you tomorrow, Monday morning, 10 o'clock, with another edition of the Hindu newspaper analysis. Thank you for watching.